Get Felcha. Thousand welcomes to Crann and Beatha Short Stories and Poetry for May 17th. I'm Terrance Ó Domhnaill, your village scéalaí, with more stories and poems from medium writers. I have 3 stories and 1 poem this week. The first chapter is chapter 16 of the ongoing story from Beyond the Water Wall. The second part of that wolf puppy and his savior story from last week. An LGBTQ science fiction story, and a poem from an Asian writer about vanities and war. So gather around once more and let me read them to you under the shade of the crann and beatha tree of life. My first story, as I said, is from Beyond the Water Wall, chapter 16, An Unexpected Visitor by Don Woodby, published in the Fiction Writer's Den. Previously, with the map in their hands, Trench, Spike, and Abby proposed that Mars and Wren help them break into the mansion and kill Bogus. In exchange, the fisherman would bring them to the cave. The fisherman squinted and slowly turned his head towards Mars. So your idea is to spread bombs on one side and blow them up and get in through the other side of the mansion? It might work, Spike sauntered from the window and sat next to Mars at the table. It is kind of insane, but it's not the worst I've ever heard. Mars made a signal for them to wait and went inside the room. He then returned after some moments with the bag in his hand and dropped it on the floor. He crouched and opened it up calmly, revealing a myriad of explosives. We have about 30 bombs here. They can all be remotely detonated. One with a similar power to those was enough to blow a hole in the floor and kill 3 soldiers a month ago. I don't know if you heard about that. Abby ran her fingers through her golden hair and looked deep into Trench's eyes. It will work. It has to. All right. Trench tapped both hands on his knees and stood up from the couch. It's as good a plan as any. And so they began to study the map daily, every morning and afternoon, after meals. Given his experience, Spike took the lead at first. He explained how the map worked, what were his impressions of the part that showed the inside. They all took notes and made copies of the map, so they could also study it on their own time. Every other day, the fisherman went to the city and bought whatever the others needed, food, clothes, and basically anything else. He was the only one who was still able to show his face in public, after all. One of those days, Mars and Wren were strolling outside, picking up berries from the trees when the sun had almost set. They had put some fish on the grill and gathered some potatoes and carrots from the yard. Do you know what those are? Mars asked, pointing at a short plant where some small red fruits grow. I think raspberries, maybe, she said, walking toward him. She picked up some and put them inside the basket. We should better go check that fish there, he said. It smells like something is burning. Spike and Abby were still inside the house. Trench will be back in a couple of hours if everything went like the previous times. They chatted for a while, enjoying the fresh air and the sounds of the woods. A rare sensation of freedom flooded them. Suddenly, when a moment of silence arose, the vegetation moved violently, catching their attention. It stopped and began again. Wren stood up and walked backward, as the silhouette of what looked like a large wolf emerged from the bushes, creeping toward them. The large caramel fur, with some shades of gray and white, covered what, upon closer inspection, appeared to be an emaciated figure. Go inside, Mars said, slowly. Carefully, he put himself between Wren and the creature. He stood still while the animal slithered, placing one paw in front of the other, as if searching for prey. Mars looked at his wrist and set the switcher button to 1. If necessary, he could shoot, though he didn't intend to. He prowled toward the grill, picked up a whole fish, and threw it to the ground next to the wolf. Wren slowly opened the door and jumped inside the house. She went to the ledge and opened up the window to see what was happening. Just shoot it, she thought to herself. It would be the safest way. The wolf lowered its body, but refused to move away. Mars threw another fish, and another, till there was nothing. The animal kept advancing in his direction, lowering its ears and timidly waving its tail. Suddenly it turned around and ran back, disappearing into the woods. That was our dinner, Wren said, walking back to the yard. Mars grinned. We still have the potatoes. Moments later, the fisherman returned. He looked at the grill and frowned. Vegetarian today? They then explained all that had just occurred. Wolf in this area? He shouted, astonished. Spike and Abby came out of the house and met the others in the backyard. Mars told once again what had happened, and Abby went back inside with the fisherman, saying she would get some more fish. That took unusually long, Spike murmured when they came back to the yard. As they chatted, the smell of grilled fish and roasted potatoes and carrots spread in the air. Every now and then, Mars stared at the bushes, introspective. Maybe the animal will sense the smell and return, he thought to himself, but maybe it was already full, at least not enough to take any risks. I believe we have everything planned, the fisherman spoke, breaking the short moment of silence that had arisen, as if he only waited for a window. We should take today and the next 2 days to rest and make final preparations. On the day after that, we'll move to the palace. They all agreed with the proposal and spent the rest of the evening eating and drinking. No more words about the raid were spoken. The next day in the afternoon, Wren and Mars sat on the grass outside, chatting, enjoying the light sun at the beginning of the fall. The brown leaves had already begun to fall. Mars had placed a sheet on the floor, the same sheet they lay on to sleep in the forest. The sun had almost set, but the rays still traveled between the branches, blurring their vision. They only saw the wolf when they could almost feel its breath. As it prowled toward them, they sat up slowly, then got up on their knees, and then stood up. Mars pointed his gun at it, but before he could shoot, the creature lay down with paws spread in front of its snout, gawking at them as a dog trying to get human attention. He put his hands in front of Wren's shoulder. Stay a bit behind. He slowly stood up and prowled toward the wolf. He extended his arm and placed the back of his hand in front of its snout. The animal sniffed it, then bounced back and stood still for a moment. Mars kept his arms extended and snapped his fingers. Come here, come here. Surprisingly, the wolf approached again and let him pet his head. It then lay down after a while. He wondered if the wolf had already had a friendly encounter with a human before. It's a man, he said, bending his body to look closer down there. Can you go inside and pick something to give him? Soon she came back with a big piece of pork that they had asked the fisherman to buy. The wolf caught the treat in the air, quickly tore the meat out, swallowed it, and gnawed the bones. Wren smirked. You do realize he's going to keep coming back for more meat now, right? Fine by me. We can keep him as a pet. Could even help us. You have to name him then, she said, looking at the wolf. When even the bones were gone, Wren dared to come closer and pet his head. Aries, what do you think? He kind of looks like a warrior. A pretty hungry warrior. Sounds good. Aries it is, then. At that point, the sun was already almost out. Spike, the fisherman, and Abby went outside to see what was happening. The wolf became shy at first, but after some moments, he strolled around the house twice, sniffing all of them before disappearing into the woods again. Well, now I believe you, Trench said. Looks like you, Spike, Abby chuckled and adjusted her shades. He wishes, Trench said with a grin. Are you going to go out tomorrow? Mars asked the fisherman. Yeah, why? We'll need some pieces of meat for the wolf. Maybe he will return tomorrow and the next day. All right, he answered. I'll see what I can do. You guys want to grab a beer inside? Spike asked. The three men sauntered back to the house. Abby and Wren stayed behind, strolling around the yard. How did you get involved in all of this? Wren asked her. It's a long story. She took a deep breath and looked up. Before everything, I started living with my fiancé, and we both worked for the government, so our life was pretty stable. He worked as the head of security in the building where I used to cater to the public, helping with bureaucratic stuff. We were planning to get married, so we saved a lot of money. After the election, our lives became more complicated. Our bosses were replaced by people working directly under bogus. We were watched closely. Our steps were monitored. It didn't change a lot for us. We were chill people. We just wanted to be in our corner without caring for anything else. We didn't get involved in politics or anything. We just wanted to be left alone. One day, with no warning, he was arrested for conspiring against the government. They had no proof. I don't believe he did anything. It was just not his thing. I guess they had some personal problem with him. Maybe he pissed off some high-ranking official. Maybe something like that, but it was very sudden. They put him on trial and charged him with treason. A show trial. We didn't have a chance. We were denied an attorney. The judge was clearly biased, and so he was sentenced to life in prison. They stopped next to the bushes with the raspberries. Abby took her shades off and put them inside her jeans back pocket. 2 weeks after, he was found dead inside his cell. Her lips shivered. He hung himself, or that's what they told me in a letter. Can you believe it? They sent me a letter to notify me that my fiancé killed himself. I was never allowed to visit him while he was alive. They only brought me in to recognize the body, and I couldn't even bury him. They told me that's how they handled those types of cases. If someone was charged with treason, it would be too dangerous to have a funeral, so he didn't get any, nothing. Seemed like this is a pattern among us, Wren said, But I gotta say, your case is probably the worst of us all." "Wait until you hear Spike's," Abby whispered. "He doesn't like to talk about it, though." "So after that," Wren said, "you joined his group?" "Not immediately, no. I spent some time at home, depressed. I got back to work after a week. At least the time to mourn was granted. But I was living like an undead. Finding the group gave me hope again. At least I had a purpose. It wasn't very clear, since we were always running around circles and no change came. But I kept my mind busy. It bored me eventually. To tell the truth, I've been thinking about getting away for some time now. But then you guys came along, and now I can really do something. If we succeed, everything will be different." "I'm fine getting only revenge," Wren said. "I just want them to pay. Trench told me about your story. I gotta say, it sounds a bit crazy." "Doesn't it all?" Wren asked as they strolled back into the house. My next story is the one I mentioned. It's called A True Friend. The Wolf Remembered the One Who Saved Its Life by Mariana Bosarova, published in the Hub publication. Elijah watched as Wolfie grew with each passing day. Small Wolf resembled a puppy so much that sometimes the man forgot he had taken it from the forest and that it was a wild animal. But he shouldn't have forgotten. He didn't want to get attached to the little animal, but it seemed almost inevitable. At times, Wolfie resembled a small, playful gray ball rolling around his feet, trying to catch his attention. Often, the wolf sought his closeness. Perhaps it missed the warmth and care of its mother, the she-wolf. After all, it was just a baby, a wild animal, but too tiny to fend for itself in this big and dangerous world. Moreover, Elijah didn't want Wolfie to get attached to him either. The wolf shouldn't forget its instincts. That would be dangerous for the animal, especially since the time to return to the forest was approaching. Inside his heart and mind, the man knew well that the best ending to this strange friendship would be when Wolfie ran away into the deepest forest to live alone, strong and independent. 2 months had passed since the man took the wolf in. Still, no one came to take care of it. Elisha called the rescue organizations once again and gave up. No one cared about the fate of his wild friend. The wolf continued to grow. The man began leaving the backyard gate of his cabin slightly ajar so that Wolfie could go out whenever he pleased. Several times the wolf disappeared, but then returned. Perhaps it was because of the food Elijah still left out for it. Wolfie had long been handling large chunks of meat and bones, so it was time for the grown-up wolf to learn to hunt for food on its own. At least the man hoped that some deeply hidden instinct in its blood would help with that. Its mother wasn't there to teach. Elijah went to his city flat for a week and left only a small amount of food for the wolf. When he returned to the forest cabin, Wolfie was gone. The man felt relieved and somewhat sad. What had happened to his little wild friend? He hoped the wolf was free and happy in the native forest. Autumn came. The wolf did not return to Elijah. The man sometimes felt like he glimpsed it among the trees near the cabin, but he couldn't be sure. Perhaps his imagination was playing tricks on him. Almost every evening he heard the howls of wolves, but that was normal for the forest. Yet deep down, he hoped that Wolfie was still wandering around. It was an irrational hope, but his attachment to the animal hadn't faded. He hoped the wolf was alive and well. The weather cooled down. Winter was knocking at the door, and in previous years, Elijah avoided coming to his forest cabin during the cold season. Because of Wolfie, he changed his habits and visited the place once a month, leaving some meat in the same spot where it used to snack. Naturally, on the next visit, there was no trace of the food he had left behind, but that was normal, as various wild animals roamed around the hut. There was no way to be sure Wolfie had found the prey in time. It wasn't easy, but Elijah decided to stop visiting the forest cabin during the winter. He could do nothing more for his wild friend. He gave him the chance to survive, and all now depended on Wolfie's luck and strength. Elijah went to the cabin to stop the electricity and prepare the house for the winter. He also wanted to lock the yard door. When he arrived, he was surprised to see someone in the cabin. At first, he thought he had forgotten to turn off the kitchen lights, but then he saw the silhouettes of 2 men inside. The locker of the entrance door of the cabin was broken. It seemed someone had hacked into his property. Then the man noticed a large SUV car parked outside the lodge. What did these men do in his place? Inside his forest cabin, there was nothing valuable, just ordinary dishes and blankets. The furnishings were quite simple, even Spartan. Elijah didn't need many comforts, only peace and privacy when he came here. He felt those intruders had stolen his peace. For some time he watched them from the yard. The 2 men, holed up in his forest cabin, were talking and gesturing intensely. Suddenly, one of them exploded and made a swing to hit the other. They were arguing, and after that, Elijah heard their hurried footsteps inside the cabin, and seconds later, both of them emerged in front of him. The man who came out first froze in place and locked eyes with him, unable to hide his surprise. The other almost pushed his companion. "Who are you guys, and what are you doing here?" Elijah asked him. "Who's asking?" the man in front grunted. "This place is mine, and you got inside without permission." Two intruders stood side by side, and only then did Elijah see that the one behind was holding a knife in his hand. The two intruders stood side by side, and only then did Elijah see that the one behind was holding a knife in his right hand. They had forgotten their quarrel and were staring at him menacingly. The situation could have escalated out of control. Both of them advanced towards him simultaneously. "Listen," Elijah said, "gather your belongings and disappear from here. I'll pretend I hadn't seen you." "Or what?" smirked one of them. "You're by yourself here, aren't you?" The one with the knife took a few quick steps and lunged towards Elijah. Alcohol breath wafted from his partially open mouth. Elijah stepped back. Just as close behind him, a fierce growl was heard, and a swift gray silhouette darted past him and lunged towards the men. A sharp screech pierced the air as the animal's sharp teeth sank into one of the men's legs. He thrashed wildly, but couldn't break free and collapsed on the ground onto his back. The other man stood as if paralyzed. Incoherent sounds come from his throat, and the knife slipped from his trembling hand. "Wolfie," Elijah called out. "Hey, buddy, leave him, leave him." The wolf growled throatily and released the man's leg. Then he let out a prolonged howl and advanced towards the other man, who snapped out of his stupor, leaned towards his companion and pulled him up, dragged him towards the SUV. The wolf stood facing Elijah, his eyes glowing in the darkness, as if time had frozen. The man stared at his once friend without blinking. The wolf didn't move, only emitting strange sounds resembling heavy sighs, then rushed to the forest. Wolfie stepped into the shadow of the trees around the lodge, let out a powerful howl, and melted into the darkness. It was the last time when Elijah saw Wolfie. His wild friend saved his life. Despite its wild nature, the wolf remembered the one who saved its life and gave it a chance to grow and be rescued. And so that's a pretty good ending to a story. I don't know, she might do something else with that one. You never know. I'll keep an eye out for everyone. I'm going to take a break right about now and let you listen to my advert here for a couple of minutes while I go get a drink. And I'll be right back to finish up the second half. I want to invite everyone to listen to Crann and beatha Stories and Poetry every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Reese Across America Radio. Search out www.reaseacrossamerica.org/radio by typing in the word Reese in these mobile apps, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, or TuneIn. Or find them on a web browser and join us to listen to the show and support WAA Radio, Whiskey Alpha Alpha Radio for any veterans listening. Reese Across America is a nonprofit radio station that supports veterans programs and organizations that help needy veterans. By joining us at Reese Across America, you are helping to support veterans in need across the U.S. So search us out and enjoy the shows they have to offer and thank a veteran while you're at it. Now I want to take another minute or so to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going and to advertise my website. I've set up a donation tab on the Crann and beatha Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crannandbeatha.com using PayPal for your security. This way there is no credit card info saved anywhere and you can use any currency you wish from around the world. If you like this podcast, please share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. Since the show is audio only, just take the website name from the podcast logo shown here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. There you'll see a homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. And on the menu bar at the top, there are links at all the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to want to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your patronage and support. Now back to the show. Welcome back. Now let's get into the third story for the day. My next story is entitled The Cornfield, a gay sci-fi short. Someone is about to change, by Evan Purcell, published in Prism and Pen. I loved my son Jonah more than anything. He was always such a happy boy. After his father died, it was just the two of us on the farm. Well, we had workers to help out with most of the chores, but they didn't come every day. As Jonah got older, I tried to get him to take on more responsibilities. Most of my friends from church had strong, sporty sons who could fix anything. Jonah wasn't like that. He wasn't lazy or anything, but he preferred to help with inside chores or trips to the market. Once he started high school, he spent a lot more time away from the farm. While my friend's son signed up for football or wrestling, Jonah joined the drama team. He loved it. I saw some of his shows, and I could tell he was having fun. I guess he was a good actor, but I don't know. Acting isn't really a talent, and it's not practical. I didn't tell him that, of course, but I think he could sense my disappointment. I just wanted Jonah to be happy and to learn skills that would prepare him for adulthood. Slowly, he stopped telling me about his life. He stopped bringing his friends over to the house. I didn't even know who his friends were anymore. I missed our old relationship. I really did. Everything was better when he was a kid. One Saturday morning, I was washing dishes in the kitchen when Jonah came up to me looking really nervous. He asked if we could sit together and talk. I wiped off my hands and followed him into the living room. We sat on the couch, but he wouldn't say anything. He just kept fidgeting with his hands. "What's wrong?" I asked. He answered, but his voice was too quiet for me to hear. "What?" "Mom, I'm gay," he repeated. He started crying, just letting the tears ooze down his cheeks, as he told me about a boy he kissed in drama club. I didn't believe him at first. We didn't have gay guys in Nebraska. It must have been a prank. But you should have seen those tears. No one could fake tears like that. He stopped talking and finally wiped his eyes. Then he waited for my answer. I couldn't support this, obviously. I didn't know how to fix his problem, but I was sure I'd figure it out. I thought about all my church friends. None of their kids had dealt with this. At least I didn't think so. He looked so desperate for an answer, and I really wanted to comfort him. But I didn't know what to say. Eventually, I just nodded and told him that he should go outside and finish his chores. He flinched at my reaction. I watched as he sadly walked outside and disappeared into the cornfield. He was doing exactly what I told him, but I still felt awful. He placed me in a terrible position, and I reacted the best way I could, but I think I hurt him. After he left, I didn't know what to do. I walked around the house, always looking out the windows, waiting for Jonah to come back. As soon as he did, I'd sit him down, and we'd try that conversation again. I'd tell him that I still loved him, but that I didn't approve. Bam! A loud thud came from the cornfield. I ran to the window to see if Jonah was okay, but all I saw were corn stalks swaying in the wind. Was Jonah hurt? I pushed open the screen door so hard that the top hinges loosened. "Jonah!" I shouted. After a long silent moment, Jonah walked out of the cornfield. His expression was blank, and his movements were weirdly robotic. I don't know what it was, but he didn't seem like himself. When he reached the porch, I asked him what happened. "I saw a shooting star," he answered coldly. He walked past me and stopped at the screen door. He looked up at the loose hinge. "Looks broken. Let me get my tools, and I'll fix it." Then he disappeared into the house. My tools? Since when did he have his own tools? I followed him into the house. He'd gone into the kitchen to rifle through our odds and ends drawer. "Mom, where's the Phillips head?" Jonah, are you okay?" I stood behind him and placed my hands on his shoulder. "Sure," he said, pulling out a screwdriver. "You can just forget about our conversation from earlier. I'm different now." Then he walked past me and started fixing the door. On one level, I knew that something was off, but on another level, I was happy. Jonah wasn't confused anymore. Plus, he was finally starting to act like other boys his age. In 5 minutes, he fixed the door, and in 20, he repaired our loose porch step. When he came back inside, dusty and sweaty, I was fixing lunch. Grilled cheese and bean soup. He always helped me make the grilled cheese. Honestly, his tasted better than mine. I never knew why. "Jonah, can you finish these?" "Nah, I don't really like doing kitchen stuff anymore." He plopped onto the couch and turned on a football game. I didn't argue. He'd already done his part. A few minutes later, we ate together. Jonah had his elbows on the table and was chewing with his mouth open. Neither of us spoke for most of the meal. "So, what do you want to talk about?" I eventually asked. He mumbled something with his mouth full. "What was that?" "I'm quitting drama." "Are you sure?" "Yes," he answered. "Jonah's going to play football instead." Jonah. He just referred to himself in the third person. Something was wrong. "What did you say?" "I said I'm going to play football." I took a long look at him. He hadn't changed, not physically, but the way he sat, the way he moved, the way he shoveled in his lunch. It was like the boy in front of me was a stranger wearing Jonah's face. What happened to you this morning? I told you, he answered with impatience. There was a shooting star. At 11 in the morning? Yes, he said, a small one. It crashed right at Jonah's feet. You mean your feet, I muttered. Sorry, my feet, he smiled. Rather, right after I made a wish. Chills ran up my back. What did you wish for? He shrugged. Doesn't matter. It worked. He scooped the rest of his soup into his mouth and loudly swallowed. Then he wordlessly left the table without taking his dishes. I watched him stroll into the living room, flop onto the sofa, and turn ESPN back on. Something was very, very wrong with my son ever since he walked out of that cornfield. I had to find out what was going on. While the TV blared, I snuck behind him and out the front door. Either he didn't notice or he didn't care. As I stepped into the sunlight, surrounded by such a beautiful summer day, I was filled with dread. I'm a God-fearing woman, so I don't believe in the supernatural. I believe in miracles, but not ghosts, not magic. I knew that there was nothing in the cornfield to possess my son, but I needed to see for myself, just in case. I took a deep breath and stepped into the field. As soon as I pushed my way through the tall stalks, I was on edge. Something felt different here, unnatural. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was surrounded by stalks of corn in every direction, nothing else. I'm not sure how long I walked, but I was pretty far from the house when I noticed a gap in the corn about 3 feet wide. It seemed like just an empty space until I looked at the ground. A brown rock stuck out of the ground. It was cracked down the middle, releasing a purple goo under the ground, shimmering, almost beautiful. This was a meteorite. This is what changed my son. You found the shooting star. I spun around. Jonah was standing right behind me. With the sun shining behind him, his face was hidden in shadow, but as he stepped closer, I could see his eyes. Oh God, his eyes had turned pure black. I slowly backed away, the purple goo squishing under my shoes. Well, what are you? He kept walking forward, his face blank. I'm your son, Jonas. Then he slapped the side of his head. Sorry, I meant Jonah. You're not my son. Yes, I am. It just takes a while. You know, for the new thoughts to settle into the old thoughts. He smiled. I've been improved by our little shooting star. But don't worry, I'm still Jonah, just the version that I wanted to be. He kept inching closer, and I kept backing away. The cornstalks poked into my sides and tangled in my hair. This morning, he explained, I looked up into the sky and wished to be normal, and the meteor answered my prayers, and now I am normal. But your eyes, sorry, he laughed, and it didn't sound like Jonah's laugh. They'll go back to normal soon, by tomorrow for sure. Please don't look at me like that. I promise you, I'm not some pod person. I won't be violent or evil. I'm just an augmented version of myself. He reached forward and placed his hand on my shoulder. Chills vibrated through my body, and I instantly pulled away. What's wrong? He asked. This is what I want. Isn't this what you wanted too? No, I screamed, surprised at my own desperate voice. I didn't want this. I wanted... But I'll play football. I'll fix door hinges. I'll ask out what's her name, Vanessa. I won't embarrass you anymore. His expression was so blank, so horribly blank. Please, whatever you are, get out of my son's body. Mom, he said slowly, you're not listening. I am your son. Nothing's possessing me. If I wanted, I could change back to the way I was. Then do it, I mumbled. His black eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean? I was crying. I'm not sure when it started, but I could feel the warm tears streaking down my face. I don't want you to change. I want my old son back. But you didn't like him. I loved him, I said, the words pouring out. He was this fun, dramatic, happy kid, and I didn't understand him, but I loved him. Please, change him back. Smiling, Jonas sat on the ground right in front of the meteor. He casually took out his black contacts and flicked them off his fingers. His eyes were back to their normal blue. Then he picked up the meteorite, rose to his feet, and walked away. Wait, I shouted. What's going on? Jonas stopped and looked over his shoulder. I got to take this back to the drama department. I told them I'd have it back an hour ago, but it took you longer than I thought. What? Mom, I'm an actor. If I want to make a point, I do it in style. But I don't understand. Jonas smiled. He hadn't smiled at me like that in a long time. No, he said, I think you finally do. And last I have a short poem for you. It's called Vanities, a poem about going astray by H.C. Leung. And he published this in Thought Thinkers. Follow me, she says, while her deep, widened eyes hold on to mine, like a debit that's perfectly sized. For there is gold at the end of the tunnel, and a high throne for you. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But she's holding my hand, her delicate fingers intertwined with mine, while her full black bountiful hair sails the wind like a thick brushed calligraphy. Behind me, miles away in the Indus Valley, a voice of reasoning keeps calling. Home is that way, don't stray away. But I'm no longer listening. Inside me is a world fully rummaged, where the regime and coalition have both fallen, and the resistance has stopped fighting. Forgive me, Lord, for I am the Lamb, who's lost and cannot be saved. For wouldn't you agree when I say that there's no right or wrong in a universe that's impartial? The road itself is paved with thorns, but her weary, pristine heart is all I wish to follow. If in much wisdom is much grief, then let me keep spiraling into the abyss. And that's all I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed my stories and this last poem. It's definitely thought-provoking. And other than that, watch this on YouTube, listen to it in Spotify and the rest of the podcast apps that you may have access to, and visit with us again next week. Sláinte. Gara Mahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. Maybe one of them might touch your heart a little. Disclosure for everyone. In order to read the complete stories and poems, you'll need to sign up for a subscription to Medium. If I see a link by the author on one of the stories to allow everyone to read it, I will let you know in the newsletters. Please return again next week for another episode of Crann, beatha, Stories and Poetry. As a Sean K., I want to continue to delight you with a story or a poem that may bring you a smile or make you think a little bit after we part for the day. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. Long life and fair health to you. Salfada a gúsprech, sláinte chucad. Slán go foil. Goodbye for now.